Better
There
for
you go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, now we can start officially. Yeah.
So should I start?
Yeah.
We're live. Okay. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the Kurdish Forum. I'm here, Dr. Joel Parker at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University, and I'm pleased to welcome our speakers. Looking forward to hearing them, and I don't want to take up too much time at the beginning. This is a very, very important moment in Kurdish history. We've seen dramatic developments. Many would view them as, I wouldn't say negative, but very concerning, to say the least. In some cases, definitely negative displacement of people, intense battles, and essentially the loss of the Syrian Democratic Forces controlled area in the last matter of weeks. So I think this is a very important moment. And with that being said, we have speakers who have been working both within and without the Kurdish movement for the last few decades. So we have here rich depth of knowledge, and again, personal acquaintance with, and in some cases being inside of the Kurdish movement itself here tonight. And I appreciate everyone who's joining us. I want to give the floor to Professor Ofra Bengio to kind of introduce our subject and talk about the question we're asking tonight, and allow her to express how she feels about the situation today. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Ofra Bengio, who is originally actually from Syria herself.
Okay, good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for the speakers who give of their time, and they are so generous you are, and really it's a very important meeting now. I would like to say just a very few words. In the year 1963, the Ba'ath Party published a document which was titled as the causes for the collapse of the Ba'ath Party, 1963. And this document is so important because Saddam Hussein and the other Ba'ath Party learned from that document, so that when they came back in 1968 to power, they managed to stay in power for 35 years. I'm saying it because now there is a debate among the Kurds. How should we continue from this point? Should we let bygones be bygones and look for the future and forget about the past? Or should we maybe ask the question, what went wrong? And in my opinion, as one who has been studying the Kurdish question for so many years, I think this is the crucial question now to ask. What went wrong? Because it's like Einstein said, if you repeat the same mistake again and again, there will be no difference in the results. So if we want different in the result, we should first of all ask what went wrong. And many partners have to this wrong, not just the United States and what I call the unholy alliance between Erdogan, Trump, and Al-Jolani. So this is one question that we need to be brave enough to ask tonight. The other question is, who should do the soul searching? Is it just the scholars who have started already doing this soul searching, or the leaderships? Because many of the mistakes are on the leadership's shoulders. When will they wake up and start asking these questions? This we should encourage the leaderships in each place to try and do this soul searching. Another question that we need to ask is the model of a unified state, which is sanctified so much by the West, especially by Trump now, is it really the real model which will work here in the Middle East, where there are so many minorities and so many problems? Or should we look again for the decentralized state? I know it's maybe too late for Rojava, but we still need to ask this question. How can we salvage what has remained of the entity of Rojava from now on, and not let it go on as it is started in these days? And maybe the last question, how to prevent the spillover to KRG. I'm very afraid that what has happened in Rojava might also contaminate in the KRG, because I think that Turkey has also eyes on taking or actually dominating the KRG, and this is very dangerous, and we should ask these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ofra Bengio. This is really an important time. I want to try and move forward so we can have plenty of time at the end for questions. And by the way, for those of you with questions, you can also direct a question to Professor Bengio, who's really one of the leading experts on the Kurdish movement. So first of all, our first speaker is Professor Fabrice Balanche, who teaches geography at Lyon University, the Lumière Lyon 2, and is an adjunct fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. He's been writing on the geopolitics of the Middle East for several decades, in particular Syria and Lebanon, looking at the minority groups especially. And he has held positions at Stanford's Hoover Institution and the French Institute of the Near East. He's the author of 6 books on the Syrian conflict and Middle Eastern geopolitics, including most recently, I think, The Lessons of the Syrian Crisis in French, with an introduction by Gilles Keppel. Very recommended. It received the Geopolitical Book Prize. Many of you know Fabrice and his amazing work. And in particular, recently, he's been very much dedicated to studying the Kurdish issue. So I'm very looking forward to hearing him speak now.
Thank you, Joel. So, yes, situation in northeastern Syria is dramatic because there is no more Kurdish freedom, no more Kurdish autonomy in Syria. Okay, the conflict is not over. It could last for several weeks or months, but without external support, the Kurdish autonomy is finished in Syria. Arab militia belonging to the Syrian Democratic Forces have all defected. Arab fighters of the YPG has also left. And we can see that the YPG cannot defend Hasakeh, for instance, because the city has an Arab majority, 2/3 of the population, and also the countryside is also largely Arab. The collapse of the autonomous administration of northeastern Syria can be explained by its weak legitimacy in northern Syria. When you have 2/3 of the population who is Arab, you cannot create a Kurdish statelet or even an Arab Kurdish federation. It was just a dream. It was just a myth. I visited the several times. I know very well that the Arab population didn't want to be with the Kurds, and that's why when Bashar al-Assad fell in 2024 in December, it was very clear that the whole Arab population wanted to join Ashara, because Ashara is a Sunni, is an Arab, is conservative, like the Arab population in northeastern Syria, that they never accepted the Kurds as the last agreement between Shara and Mazlum Abdi will be like the March 10 agreement in 2025. What does it mean? Shara and especially Turkey are just waiting the good action of the whole Kurdish freedom in northeastern Syria. So, to begin, it's important and to show you this map of the ethnic division in northeastern Syria in 2026. You can see that the Kurdish population is just in around Kamishli, Kobane. Afrin was a Kurdish stronghold by the past, but today, it's a mixed area because more than 300,000 Kurds left Afrin because of the Turkish occupation. It's something for Ras Al Ain. All the whole Kurdish population from this area left the area. You had an ethnic cleansing in North Syria against the Kurds. And the last ethnic cleansing was in January 26, when you have more than 200,000 people who left Aleppo, Raqqa, even Hasakeh to Kamishli and Derik, because they are afraid about the retaliation from Arab population. This situation was expected. For me, it was expected since the beginning of the self-administration. In 2017, I'll give you an example. In March 2017, I went to Kamishli from Iraq. And at that time, Kamishli was a divided city. As you can see on the map, sorry, it's in French, you have in orange the area controlled by the YPG and the area controlled by the Syrian regime. The airport and that we call the security square close to the border. And at the middle, you had a Christian area controlled by a local militia, more pro-regime militia. And the city was divided in Kurds and the Kurdish population, mixed area, and especially in Souf of Kamishli, it was an Arab neighborhood. I was invited an evening to visit a sheikh in Kamishli. The sheikh was he's a brother of the chief of the Shamar, the Sanaded, and I was invited by the priest of Kamishli, Abuna Saliba, and he bring me in my hut. He told me, "Do you want to visit the brother of the Shamar tribe? It will be interesting for you." I told him, "Yes, why not?" Well, he forgot to tell me that the sheikh was in the security square. So I didn't have a Syrian visa. And when we enter in the security square, they haven't asked me my passport, fortunately, because I could be in jail at that time. So I visited this guy. He was very, very anti-Kurdish. He told me, we want Assad back. If Assad is not able to be back, we will welcome Erdogan, because Kurds, Apoist, what does it mean? A follower of Apo, of Öcalan. We cannot support them anymore. Kurds are not Syrian. But I asked him, sorry, but your brother is the chief of the Shamar, of the Sanaded. He's vice president of Al Jazeera Canton. Are you in trouble with your brother? He told me, no, with my brother, it's fine. We are brother and we share the same feeling. What? You share the same feeling? And the Sanaded is with the Syrian Democratic Forces, and so I don't understand. He told me, just because we are pragmatic. The Kurds are the leader today. They have US support, so we have to be with the stronger. So I understood that the Syrian Democratic Forces, the self-administration was very weak, very fragile. Without American support, it will collapse. And that's why we have seen the result last January. In 2 days, to take Raqqa, the Reserve, and now Hasakeh, because the Arabs always were against the Kurds. And the 10 March agreement between Shara and Abdi, for Abdi, expecting international support, expecting Shara will collapse. But by the contrary, Shara was supported by and after the Druze problem, the Kurds were he gets the green light from Trump. He decided to take Sheikh Maqsood in Aleppo, and then to take Raqqa, the reservoir, especially the reservoir, because you have 70% of the Syrian oil, and it's very important for Shara. So he decided to attack northeastern Syria. And unfortunately, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the YPG, the Kurdish militia inside, were unable to stay in this area without US support, and because the Arab population were against them. So the result today, it's you have just few area under the control of the Kurds. Kobane, about 200,000-300,000 people. Around Kamishli, probably 1 million of people, but you have 1/3 of the population Arabs. Hasake is Arab, but also between Amuda, Amuda and Kamishli, you have the Arab belt and many Arab villages. I think that the weak point of the area, it's as you can see on the map, Al-Qahtaniye, on the Kamishli Feshrabour road. It's very easy for the Arab tribe and the Ashara forces to take Al-Qahtaniye and to isolate Kamishli Hamouda from Iraq, where you have the only road to supply the Kurds, and then it will be finished for the Kurds. Today, you have seen that US forces withdraw from Tanef, this military base close to Jordan and Iraq on southeast Syria. So it's the beginning of the withdrawal of the American troops from Syria. I think that the American base, Rmeilan, Asake, will follow soon, because Trump don't want to let troops in this area. And the integration of the Syrian of the YPG in the Syrian army is just impossible. It's just impossible. You cannot join an army composed by jihadi, by Islamists, that they dream about vengeance, about retaliation against the Kurds. So without international support, they will continue. They will take the area easily, because even among the Kurdish population, people lost hope about Kurdish autonomy. Last mission I have done in the area last year, 2 years ago, my Kurdish friends told me, we just want to stay at home. We don't want to be refugees outside of Syria. We have seen what's happened in Afrin. We have seen what's happened in Tel Abyad, Ras El Ain. You have a refugee camp for Kurdish people close to Hasake, where you have about 30,000 Kurds from Ras El Ain. And it's a very bad example for the Kurdish population, because they are very afraid to be like their friends of Ras El Ain. So they just want to stay at home. They are tired about the war, the fight. They know very well that they are not enough strong to resist against Ashara, but against Turkey, because if Shara has difficulty to take the area, I'm sure that Erdogan will provide artillery support or airstrike support against the Kurds. In 2019, I was in the area in October 2019 when Turkey invaded northeastern Syria and took Tel Abyad and Ras Al Ain, and I saw that the YPG were alone, because even at that time the Arab militia supported the Kurds against Turkey, and so they were not able to resist against the Turkish proxy. So it will be the same thing today.
Professor Balanche,
What's
thank
the
you.
future for the Kurds? Unfortunately, the same future like the Alawite, but does it accept this Islamist domination? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Balanche. That was excellent, if somewhat depressing. But the reality is the reality. We
Yes.
can't hide from that. I think we'll have to come back to you in the questions, because this is really it's beyond just mere academic. It's very urgent. It's important to understand. One thing you said, which may have been lost a bit in the sound, was that the U.S. Forces left Al-Tanf in the last
Yes.
24, 48 hours, which is a fairly dramatic move. And I think, as you said, the U.S. forces are on the way out, it seems like. And I mean, and the writing has been on the wall for some time, but the fact that it's happening right now is certainly something to be very concerned about. So without further ado, I want to go on to our next speaker. Again, we want to hear more from Professor Balanche, but at the end, Dr. Jonathan Spire is with us, and unfortunately, not unfortunately that we have Jonathan Spire, which is fantastic, but unfortunately, Itay Anghel was going to join us, and he unfortunately has been sick. So he's an excellent documentary filmmaker, and many Israelis know him from Channel 12. He has spent a lot of time traveling in Syria and Iraq, and I don't know how we managed to get Dr. Spire, but we did, and he's also traveled extensively in Iraq and Syria and other places. He's an analyst, writer, and has done his share of also journalism, really, specializing in Middle Eastern affairs. He's now the director of research at the Middle East Forum and the editor of Middle East Quarterly, and contributes frequently to several newspapers around the world. I won't go into each one. You've seen his columns. He's the author of Days of the Fall, a reporter's journey in the Syria and Iraq wars, that came out in 2017, and that was also based on his travels. And before that, something that still is relevant today, it was his book from 2010, which was called The Transforming Fire, The Rise of the Israeli Islamist Conflict, which certainly I think we should go back and read that again, just to kind of understand what's happened in the Israeli-Gaza situation. But nevertheless, without further ado, I'd like to allow Dr. Spire to present his take on things right now.
Thank you, Joel, and good evening to everybody. As Joel mentioned, I have worked quite extensively inside the autonomous administration area, and I first visited there in March 2013 as a journalist, and visited many times following that in all areas of the what was the autonomous administration area, up to and including Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor and Kobani and Serikani and elsewhere. And I say that not in order just to sort of recount my biography, but rather in order to say that my remarks in the next few minutes will be from the point of view, of course, of a journalist and analyst, but also from the point of view of somebody who, without any attempt to hide the matter, was a supporter of the Kurdish autonomous area in northeast Syria, which I regarded as, for a period of time at least, managing to maintain the most orderly and best defended and most livable in many ways part of the country during that quite long period now concluded, it would appear, in which the country was subject to a kind of de facto partition and frozen conflict. That long situation that was, of course, then broken by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in late November of 2024. Well, our good friend and colleague Fabrice has really been through the sequence of events regarding the last month, so I won't try to reiterate that. And instead, perhaps I'll try just to make some suggestions and analysis of what has taken place. And firstly, with regard to the issue which Ofra also mentioned, our dear friend and colleague Ofra also mentioned, which was the issue of criticism of, and justified and necessary criticism, perhaps, of some of the players and leaders in the area. In this regard, let me say the following. It is without doubt possible and probably necessary to be critical and to criticize aspects of the performance of both the political and perhaps other elements of the leadership of the autonomous administration and Syrian democratic forces. Having said that, it does seem to me that the question we should ask ourselves is, could it have been otherwise? In other words, for example, in many circles, we've heard a criticism which was that the leadership of the autonomous administration did not spend enough time on diplomacy, did not spend enough time on building alliances, on outreach where it was necessary in the many years of time they had, and therefore at the crucial moment, the autonomous administration found itself without friends. It seems to me that whilst one can make that criticism, even had it been the case that the autonomous administration had, as it did not, had set up and financed a truly professional diplomatic mission into Washington, D.C. and another in Brussels and invested in creating friendships and alliances, even had that been the case, in the situation that pertained in the first months of 2026, even a setup like that would not have experienced a profoundly different outcome to what was in fact experienced. Now, why do I feel confident in saying that? Because we have the example, I would suggest, of the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq, which, unlike the autonomous administration, has invested and did invest professionally and well in building missions, building relationships, building alliances. And nevertheless, we saw in the period after the referendum in September 2017 that when the KRG faced the crunch point and the issue was geopolitics and alliances at the very highest strategic level in the Middle East, it also found itself friendless. That is to say, it seems to me that if you have a situation in which you have two utterly incompatible projects on Syrian soil, the first, the emergent Sunni Islamist regime of Ahmed al-Shara, and the second, the autonomous administration, and the United States and the West have put their backing behind the first project, that of HTS. It doesn't really matter what else you could have done at the level that was possible for the autonomous administration. It would almost without doubt have been swept away in exactly the way that the existing relationships that they had were swept away very rapidly in the first weeks of January of this year. This, I think, is something which is important to first of all understand. And I think then we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, so what can we learn from that situation? And perhaps what can be and ought to be done now? In this regard, I want to state very clearly that my own opinions are based on the analysis that what has changed in Syria is that we are experiencing and have experienced a changing of the sectarian guard. What has not changed in Syria is the fundamental dynamics within the country. That is to say, after more than a half century of perhaps historically anomalous Alawi ascendancy, which emerged for reasons which we are, and within the context of which we are all aware, this Alawi ascendancy has been, of course, destroyed. And what is replacing it is a Sunni Arab ascendancy, not a fundamental change in the way that power and politics are conducted in the country, but rather a changing of the sectarian guard. A Sunni Arab Islamist Syria, deeply repressive to minorities, is very clearly in the process of being established. It could not be clearer if we think of the events of the last year. It simply could not be more plainly stated than was stated in reality. First of all, of course, with the attacks on the Alawis back in February, March of last year, then with the two occasions in which the Druze faced repression, and now, of course, as Fabrice, I think, also mentioned, with inevitability and predictability, the regime turning on the Kurds. So what then might be done? What can be suggested constructively out of the very, very serious situation in which the Syrian Kurds now find themselves? First of all, many people here, of course, will be familiar with the phrase that the Kurds never internalize defeat. And this is usually said with pride, and it's a good thing. It means that people don't become demoralized. Having said that, defeat should not be internalized, dear friends, but it should be looked straight in the face. We should not be pretending that what has happened is anything less than a very, very severe setback and defeat over the course of the last month, really. So what might be suggested? First of all, let me state very plainly that my view, given that I said that the fundamental dynamics in the country have not changed, is that any independent strength, including independent armed strength, let me state it plainly, that can be maintained outside of state frameworks can and must be maintained. The Druze in the southwest of Syria are maintaining and have continued to maintain an independent armed framework vis-a-vis the state. Arms in the hands of Druze in a variety of frameworks. This is something which Syrian Kurds need absolutely to maintain themselves, particularly when we note the case, apparent both in the Alawi area and in Druze southwest and in the northeast, that there is a clear decision on the part of the Shara regime to make use of deniable armed force in the hands of Sunni Arab tribes. The Sunni Arab tribes constitute an armed asset for the Shara regime, which they used in the west, southwest, and northeast, which they can use as a deniable force. That's to say, to put it plainly, the Sunni Arab tribes can carry out massacres. These massacres can help the Shara regime, and the Shara regime can deny its responsibility. This we have seen on a number of occasions. In the face of a threat of that kind, it is absolutely vital that Kurdish armed strength, in one form or another, be maintained outside of the frameworks of the emergent Sunni Islamist state. This, I think, is a crucial point to be made and needs to be stated plainly. In addition to this, of course, all existing local autonomous structures should be and need to be maintained for as long as they can be maintained. And here we have the ambiguity of Syria. So if we have an organization such as the Asayish can officially be part of the security forces, but if the Asayish has existing local armed strength on the ground, nevertheless, this can be an asset for the Kurdish communities, and this needs to be maintained. And likewise, with regard to the political concessions supposedly made on January 30th, the governorship of Hasaka city, and so on and so forth. The point I'm making, I think, is clear with regard to the crucial need to maintain independent local frameworks. This is one of 3 points, really, I want to make. There are 2 more. The second one is with regard to visibility and international connections. The Kurds have friends, and they have friends in the United States, and they have friends in the region as well. The point of simply maintaining relationships and visibility is an obvious one, but I want to make a second point within that. There is an emergent regional, I won't say alliance, but regional association, if one can put it that way, of countries which are opposed to Turkey and opposed to its regional ambitions. Just in the Knesset 2 days ago, there was a conference of Greek and Cypriot and Israeli and American representatives. This is an emergent body, and I think I would suggest if we're thinking about Kurdish diplomacy should be pointed in that direction. This is an emergent power alliance in the region. The Kurds have a natural place in that, and this is something which I think should be borne in mind when building friendships. And just lastly, with regard to the issue of unity, certainly many Kurds and friends have been pleased by the displays of sort of pan-Kurdish consciousness and unity in the recent weeks in response to the events in January. This is something certainly to be welcomed. At the same time, this can be a mood which can come in time of crisis, as we have seen, and then can just as rapidly dissipate. I want to express the hope, and on this I will conclude, that this sentiment can be something more than just a passing mood, and that we can the strands of cooperation which we saw actually between KRG and Erbil and between the Syrian Kurdish leadership in that moment of crisis can perhaps be built on into something more solid. I very much echo Ofra's expression of concern regarding Turkish ambitions vis-à-vis the KRG and the extent to which these can perhaps have been strengthened because of the success from their point of view in northeast Syria. And it seems to me that the contrary to that must be a building of Kurdish unity between, to the greatest extent possible at least, between the Syrian Kurdish leadership as was and the KRG leadership. And in concluding, let me just say, I know that it is the point that non-Kurds entering the Kurdish arena always say, the first point that somebody who knows nothing at all about the Kurds says is, why aren't the Kurdish movement unified? Why can't you find a way to cooperate? So in this regard, let me divest myself for a moment in concluding of my roughly 15 years or 16 years of experience with the Kurds and return to this first moment of innocence, like a non-Kurd entering the Kurdish arena for the first time, and say, friends, what you absolutely need, first and foremost, is at least the greatest possible amount of unity of forces between Kurdish players at this crucial time. And I'll conclude on the following point, and we can perhaps develop it in discussion. I believe, at least, and I'm not frightened to say it, that the strategic goal that you need to have written on your banner is Kurdish sovereignty and Kurdish independence as the final clear ambition, not tomorrow, of course, but maybe many days hence, but as the final clear ambition of the Kurdish movement, and not efforts at brotherhood of nations or other illusions which I'm afraid are not coming to our region anytime soon. So on that, I'll conclude, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Speyer. That was very clear and very interesting. I think that was also somewhat of a manifesto of sorts and inspiration. Definitely a compliment to Professor Balanche's very realistic picture of what's going on. Certainly a springboard for thought and discussion. I see different things going on with economics. I'm going to save my questions to the end. I think we have, obviously, and you know this, and you mentioned this, real politics coming against the aspirations of a people to have their own space. And I think this is the key moment that we're in right now. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mutulu Civiroglu, who is really an expert, a multilingual Kurdish affairs analyst and journalist, known for really being inside and having deep connections within the Kurdish political and military circles. He's been reporting on the SDF, the Kurdistan regional government in Iraq, as well as the Kurdish communities in Turkey and Iran. He's just has an enormous insight on the geopolitics of the Middle East, especially what's going on here in the Levant. He teaches at the university level and is frequently consulted by international media and think tanks for his analysis and inside, understanding of both the Kurdish cause and especially one of his fields of expertise is the Jewish-Kurdish relationship, which of course is one of the reasons why we're all here today, actually. So please join us, Professor Civiroglu.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you. It was great to hear you all, Ofra, Fabrice, whose work I admired for long years, Jonathan, a friend, a colleague. It's great to be here. First of all, I want to speak as an American, tell you what's going on in Washington. Also, I would like to talk as a Kurd, what's going on in Rojava, and what's going on in Greater Kurdistan. So the title of this panel, can this situation pave the way to Kurdish unity? I want to start with some positive notes first. Yes, what we have seen in last week for 2 weeks has really paved the way to Kurdish unity. The Syrian Kurds, being the least number among the all Kurds, have always been seen as the little brother, little sisters of the Kurdish people. And the Rojava model was romanticized or has been held dear for the Kurds. So whatever has happening has really shaken the Kurds in Kurdistan and in diaspora. And since then, people are still non-stop demonstrating, protesting for the Kurds. And there is a strong resentment of accepting dismantling of the Rojava autonomy. It's not only a Kurdish tragedy, but a strategic disaster for the whole minorities in Syria, as well as in the Middle East, because Kurds offer a model that pro-Western, power sharing, embracing oppressed, vulnerable minorities, moderate Islam versus the radical Islam that many are worried that in Sham, Damascus, has been consolidating its power. So when we look at the reactions from the Kurds, Kurds from Turkey, Kurds from Iraq, even Kurds from Iran, who themselves are under a terrible situation, yet they're very vocal in supporting Kurds in Syria in different means. So the sense of unity, the sense of that intertwined feature of each part, we can clearly see that. So that's why I can tell you that the political parties who are very difficult to come together, who have different schools, different ideologies, we could clearly see that they are easily working together. They are demonstrating together. They carry flags, Kurdish national flag, and flags that symbolizing Rojava, symbolizing the Syrian Kurds. So it has really very few time has been achieved, if there is any. But in the Rojava case, last 2 weeks or so, we can clearly see that Kurds are on the streets as a Kurd for their own brothers and sisters. So this is one thing that this disaster has achieved, bring the sense of unity, acting like be responsive as a Kurdish nation rather than Kurds from Iraq, rather than PKK supporters, rather than PUK supporters, but as Kurds. And this also helped mobilizing the friends of the Kurds in everywhere. So this is one thing I want to emphasize. Fabrice mentioned how this was a delusional idea, and his encounter is very, very eye-opening. I have been hearing from different people, Soviet and academic, activists, journalists, that the administration has unnecessarily, very luxuriously invested on this idea that they can create a utopic world that Kurds and Arabs can live together. They overstretch their power militarily, politically, at the expense of Kurdish regions, at the expense of responding to the Kurdish demands, Kurdish national demands. And there is a very strong internal reckoning, internal storm ongoing within the Kurds. At the moment, the priority is just how to minimize the damage. But I can assure you, from the street of Kamishlo, from Derebesiye, from Afrin IDPs, from everyone, from intellectuals, from even people in the self-rule administration, even among the SDF. I talk to them daily, tens of times every day. There are a lot of reckoning, questioning, self-criticism that vastly investing on this idea has cost them dearly. Instead, they should have been more realistic, focus on their own traditional historical regions and advance and focus on the Kurdish identity. And now the Öcalan school versus Barzani school, the major two schools in the Kurdish national rights, there's a very strong attraction towards Barzani school. So the Kurdistan flags that used by the KRG is all over Rojava. So now people made it a national pride to raise that flag, to go back to their identity, to embrace that identity that long has been silenced by the self-rule administration, by the SDF, at the expense of all, for the sake of appealing or satisfying a larger structure. But now we see that people say that we need to, now we are in our land. There's not going to be backstabbing. You know, militarily, most of the casualties that Kurds suffered according to the accounts I hear, through the non-Kurdish components of SDF being backstabbed by their former brothers in arms, sisters in arms. So I hear that now that they are in Kobani, they are in Kamışlı, they are in Dirbesiye, they are in Derik, they are in better position to defend their land, and they are with their own people. One thing I would like to disagree with Jonathan. Jonathan, you compared Rojava to KRG, the Kurds situation in Syria to Iraq. I think the problem was not with the idea of referendum. I think there was enough support, but the timing was the problem there. There was, and this timing issue was clearly communicated with Kurdish leadership that time. US clearly communicated that. US even offered a mediation via US itself, US government and UN. If the Kurdish presidency, Kurdish leadership could have postponed the referendum. So the timing was the decisive factor at that time. Coming back to Syria, Rojava, I strongly believe the Kurdish leadership has done some clear mistakes. The leadership has long been so idle, passively watching, rather than foreseeing what's coming, rather than being preemptive, rather than being active. They just somehow they were just watching. Had what you have described, more investment on diplomacy, on PR, on media and communication, I think the outcome could have been better, or could have been much less damaging, devastating than it is. So when I told you I want to talk as an American as well, I have long been telling with the international media or the Kurdish media that whatever we are seeing here is not a cohesive US policy. Many in the US are not happy about what's going on in Syria. The policy that is being carried out on behalf of Trump administration, carried out by Mr. Barak, has long been criticized. And we have seen that the day before yesterday, when the House of Representatives held that special hearing, we could clearly see that, with the exception of two speakers, one the panelist and one the Congress members, the vast majority of people were critical of what's going on in Syria. They were critical of Kurds being abandoned. They were critical of administration handling the Syrian fire. They were critical of ISIS issue being reversed, being reintroduced with these mistakes. Especially the committee chair, Brian Musk's speech was very, very striking. He talked about how this Caesar Act sanctions, it was too soon. So many are discussing that it was too soon to repeal that. But at the same time, Lindsey Graham, at the upper chamber of the Congress, there's another effort ongoing, Save the Kurds Act. Now the Druze are trying to include themselves into this bill, which will be great. So within the Congress itself, within President Trump's party itself, there is a strong resentment against the policy that is carried out on behalf of U.S. government. And remember, let's keep in mind, we are approaching to the midterm elections this November. So the arithmetic in the Congress is at stake. So nobody knows what's going to happen. So the White House is in a very sensitive situation, very critical situation, that cannot afford upsetting their members. I'm going to wrap up, but this issue, like Ofra said in the beginning, very closely related to Iraqi side of the border as well, KRG. The Kurds from Iraq are very worried as well that the outcome can spill to them as well, especially Sinjar, Shengar region. Yazidis over there are very, very horrified that within their borders, now they see radical jihadist Islamists are there. This issue has been ringing alarm bells as well. But I think my time is over. I will wrap up and I'll leave it here. Is it my time over, Joel? Am I? Did I understand
Yes,
correctly?
yes, but let's. I want to hear from you more. Let's. If you have one other point to make or something,
Mhm.
you can make it. But we want to get to the question so we
Yeah.
can return to you.
Yes, thank you. The Syria fatigue, I call it Syria fatigue, is one of the drivers of this situation. I think just before we start this panel, European Parliament issued a very strong condemnation of what's happening in Syria. They say war crimes is amount of war crimes what has been happening. U.S. Congress is speaking up very loudly. U.S. public is speaking. U.S. media is speaking. I think one reason the Kurdish leadership was very, very passive in the beginning has led this kind of the rhetoric to be filled with pro-Shara, pro-Jolani forces, that those who are very, very happy or very, very motivated to see a united Syria, that Ofra mentioned in the beginning, sounds very good on rhetoric, united Syria, but the difficulty on the ground is very difficult, very different than romanticizing unified Syria. For example, the women issue, the YPG issue, the women issue, for the Kurds and for the interim government is a very serious issue. There are so many things that are not going to be solved with the good wishes, with emphasizing unified Syria. Unified Syria could have been achieved if this transitional government could have embraced Alawites, could have embraced the Druze, could have embraced the Christians, could have embraced the Kurds. Kurds here are the seventh, holding together the other ethnic and religious minorities. Now everybody is feeling threatened. Everybody is feeling no optimism about their future. So unified Syria, because of this Syria fatigue, everybody mentioned that. But now many realize that this is too much fantasy. Replacing Bashar Assad with Ahmed al-Shara, the similar mindset of ruling with different concept, different motives, is not going to be a solution to the Syrian problem. And we are going to see more problems. But what Kurdish leadership can do in Syria, pay attention to those states, to the people, to their criticism, try to understand, rather than, like Jonathan mentioned, rather than not facing the mistakes, shortcomings, by insisting on their mistakes, it's going to bring the same result again. Like Ofra mentioned about Einstein. Totally, I agree with that. If you insist on the same thing you have been doing that brought you here, you're going to have the same result. But the bravery that they have achieved in the front line, they always suffer. They suck at the table. This is the tragedy of Kurdish people in the last decade. They're always good in battlefield, but when they come to a negotiation, they come to a diplomatic field, they fail. And this is repeating again. But there are still means to correct this. It's not too late. I can see that Kurdish peoples, there is no reduction. There is no giving up their national demands. I was talking to Ahmet Diyarbakir before that. I got some insight. And people are, there is, despite this negative situation in Kamishlo, in Duhok, in Erbil, there is no pessimism in the aspirations, Kurdish national aspirations. The demand is very strong, but the leadership could not have been answered. But I think, despite all this negativity, I can see some positivities. If the Kurdish leadership, especially in Syria, tried things differently, and Kurdish leadership in Iraq and Syria, they need to work together, and they have achieved so far. There is a now strong understanding. They can work together. That's very promising. Once they can improve that, bring it to the higher level, I think the support for them will be more, because the international community, the world is showing that they are not oblivious to what's happening in Syria. Not many are happy what has been going on in Syria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutulu. I think I appreciate actually hearing your voice. I think most of the people who are here tonight, want to hear what you have to say, because you are answering our questions, really. These are questions that we have. I have just one or two small points to make. Well, actually, big points, but I don't want to waste time with my insight. I see, I think, bigger structures that are kind of working against the nationalist movement or whatever in Rojava. One thing is the United Nations and generally most countries are against the idea of forming new nations, breakaway nations. It's the whole world is kind of against this idea. There's nobody, if you look around the world, if the Kurds want to make friends with China or with Nigeria or with Canada, and they say, hey, what we want to do is break away and make a new state out of a state, all of these big countries are going to say, yeah, that's not cool. We don't like that. We're not in favor of that. That's not, that's just no. So I think for one thing, Kurds are working against the international order when they ask for a new state. I think another thing that's working against the Kurds inside Syria specifically, which didn't come up, at least I didn't hear very clearly, is the issue of oil and gas. And I think that's something that probably explains the rationale behind why there's so much encouragement and, if you will, support for al-Shara pushing into the northeast region and taking over the oil fields, taking over the gas fields, calling for international companies to explore, to rebuild, they want to have a new oil refinery. They want to have, do all this new infrastructure. They even want to start searching for gas off of Syria. I think Trump, when Trump hears oil, gas, it's like speaking his love language, if you want. I don't know. So I think that's something we have to probably factor into it. That's maybe these are 2 points I'm going to throw out for anybody to respond to. But let's open the floor for a couple more questions, maybe. But if anybody wants to respond to what I just said, maybe you can do that, and then we'll take like 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah. Let me briefly respond to you, Joel. Your first question, in terms of Syria, Kurds are not, promoting a new country, drawing a new map. They were promoting maybe shyly, but as a decentralized government and like a federative model. That was their idea. It was never a separation. And again, this was all, they were very shy in their demands. It was all to appease non-Kurdish components of their political and military project. It was always this concern. And that's why now we are seeing a strong emergence in Kurdish nationalism, Kurdish demands among the Kurds that enough is enough. We have silence, we have muted ourselves, we have beaten our tongues, we have never spoken our culture, our identity. It's time now. That's number one. Number two, one of the reasons that Kurdish leadership has a problem is exactly what you mentioned, an oil issue. President Trump speaks, acts, works different than traditional leaders. And you are very right to the point. When even Kurds have a lot in their possession, they never were successful to use this as an argument or introduce them as a tool to reach the President Trump. Because President Trump, what do you give me and what do you want from me? He works that way, and he's a deal maker. He takes pride in that he's transactional. But Kurdish leadership could never understand that. They had never means to reach. Maybe they couldn't reach him like Erdogan can reach Erdogan, but Israel can reach President Trump. Israel is very interested, but Kurdish leadership couldn't even, to my observation, couldn't even successfully deal with the that Israel can offer for the Kurds. So within again grassroots in Turkey, in Diyarbakir, in Kamishlo, in Erbil, there is a very silent wind coming. Very, very sympathetic to Israel's messages. Today, foreign minister message. Everyone on social media, before people were shy to talk about. Now, especially in Rojava, those messages are received very positively. People are talking. And there are criticism to the leadership that leadership failed to understand Israel. Leadership failed to respond to what Israel could offer to them. And even reaching U.S. decision makers, including Trump. Just want to leave it here. Thank you for this question.
Thank you so much, Mutulu. I want to start with a question from the chat. Mim Arin, I don't know if you want to speak, but you had a question for Dr. Spire asking about actually Öcalan and the recent changes with the PKK and the decision inside Turkey to essentially dissolve themselves. And the question is, I think, how some view this as a sort of betrayal of the Syrian Kurdish cause. And if you want to speak about that, and what do you think about this kind of did Erdogan succeed in co-opting Öcalan? I think is the question, if I understand correctly. Perhaps Mem Arin, if you want to say the question more specifically, that's what I understand.
Is this for me?
For Dr. Spire, actually, they asked. I mean, that's what the question is for Dr. Spire.
Great.
If you want to answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to relate to it. Yeah, first of all, I mean, to say that Erdogan has co-opted Öcalan is maybe too emotive, but I think that this phrase points accurately to the dynamic of events. Yes, that's to say, I think that it is impossible, let me be frank, I mean, it is impossible to divorce the positions taken by Öcalan with regard to the peace process and with regard to the dissolution of his movement, at least to some extent, from the fact that this man is a prisoner of Turkey, has been a prisoner of Turkey for more than a quarter of a century, and is not able to receive really information freely, and therefore I think is operating to some degree, at least from the point of view, one, of a lack of information, and secondly, from his own self-interest, frankly, as a prisoner who perhaps does not wish to remain a prisoner. Having said that, I think there is something else which is maybe not sufficiently grasped sometimes by observation of this particular dynamic. And frankly, it is the following, that unfortunately, Turkish use of drone technology and the Turkish development of its independent drone capacity to a great extent posed a question to the Kurdish guerrillas in Kandil, which the Kurds did not come up with an adequate answer for. I mean, simply in military and tactical terms. The Kurds did not have an adequate response to Turkish drone capacity, which means that to some extent, the decision of Öcalan and PKK leadership to understand the urgency of finding another route other than continued armed struggle was actually a response to a tactical reality. So I think that also needs to be seen as part of the discussion. So in this sense, to a great extent, yes, Erdogan succeeded in not owning Öcalan, but in turning Öcalan into somebody who felt the need to not surrender, but to find a very radically different path, partly because of Öcalan's lack of information, partly because the man is a prisoner. And I would argue or suggest to Kurdish friends, it might not be a good idea to continue to have as a tactical leader a person who is a prisoner of the enemy state, and partly because of the tactical advances made by the Turks, specifically in the area of drone technology. These, I think, all have to be put into the equation.
Thank you, Dr. Spire.
I want to add one
Yeah.
point,
Mhm.
please.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the PKK disarming is the thing that brought the collapse of the Rojava, because this gave all the fire to Erdogan to feel that the Kurds are finished. The PKK didn't put any conditions. The Kurds of Turkey didn't get anything for this disarmament. But on the other hand, Erdogan felt the way free for him to move to send Asharat to finish with the Rojava. This is very serious.
Mhm.
I think when I talk about mistakes, this is a very big mistake of the PKK. Yeah,
I want to
Jonathan, this is what I'm saying.
I want to come back to the Kurdish internal problems, but I want to ask Professor Balanche. I have a question for you that I don't see here, but I think some people have mentioned Kobani. Right now, as we speak, Kobani is kind of under siege, as far as I understand. What do you think is going to happen with Kobani in the coming, I know you're not a prophet, but what do you suspect is going to happen given the trends that, I understand the Kurds are saying 300,000 people are displaced and most of them have fled into Kobani. So what's going to happen there? Is there going to be a fight, or is it going to be a negotiated stance? What do you think is happening?
I think that Kobani is in the same situation than Sheikh Maksoud, the Kurdish neighborhood of Aleppo. Kobani is surrounded, Turkey at the north, Turkish proxies in Jarablus, in Tel Abyad, and the jihadists from Ashara on the south. So and far from Kamishli, Hasake, far from Iraq, it's not possible to send support to Kobane. So they are doing the same thing than in Sheikh Maksoud. They surround Kobane. They will negotiate the departure of the YPG, of the military forces, Kurdish military forces from Kobane. And first you will have shared patrol Basaesh and Ashara, and then Ashara will take the full control of. We will have a fight in Kobane because people know very well the issue, the end of the fight. It will be a bloody killing. They have the example of Tel Abyad, of Afrin. They know that there is no hope. And Shara is using Kobane as a leverage on Mazlum Abdi, Mazlum Kobane. Don't forget that Mazlum is from Kobane. So you have to move outside Hasake. You have to. If you don't do that, we can take Kobane easily.
So essentially, and I know that I want to thank Veysi, who's been helping us with this, and I think he wants to say something, but I just to summarize what you just said, it sounds like there's no real contiguity. What do you say? The word like it's not contiguous. The
Yes.
Kurdish zones. Essentially, the idea that Rojava would be Kobani and Kamishli, maybe in a dream world, also Afrin together, it's essentially over for now. I mean, that chapter is gone, and that's very clear from a military perspective.
Yes, and the Kurdish dream in 2015, 16, you join Kamishli with Kobane through Tel Abyad, then you join Kobane, Manbij to Afrin. I remember in 2017 when the Kurds crossed the Euphrates, took Manbij for Erdogan. It was a red flag. And he joined Russia. It was the St. Petersburg Conference in August 2016. And 1 month later, the Turkish troops enter in Syria and cut the road between Manbij and Afrin. And then 2019, they cut the road between Kobane and Kamishli. And so, the problem of the Kurds that they didn't have enough population to control the area. Between Afrin and Kobane, it's Arabs. It's 90% of the population is Arabs. Tel Abyad.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
and
so let me.
it was not possible to control the area.
It's very good point. So I see there's before we close, because I want to give Veysi a chance to say a closing word. We're just really out of time, unfortunately. But let me just see. I see Moshe Appelblatt has a question about the integration of the Kurds into the Syrian army. If this is for real, does anyone, including Ofra, does anybody want to talk about what could happen? And I would add to that with the new so-called language recognition. Is there a silver lining? Is there something that the Kurds can do between this welcoming them into the army and giving them language rights? Is this something they can work with to leverage forward, or is it kind of like just pretend?
It's a joke. It's a joke. It's only a joke for the West. It was very funny when Shara recognized Nowruz as a national day. It's already a national day. It's the Mother Feast in Syria. It's already off. When he gave the citizenship to the Kurds, Assad did it in 2011, and it just 300,000 Kurds without citizenship. All that it's just theater to persuade the West that it's an inclusive government, and no, he will never integrate the Kurds in the army. He will disarm them, he will kill them, and he will push them to move outside.
So you see, okay, well, I'll leave it on that point. I mean, I don't see al-Shara as Saddam Hussein yet. I don't know if he's going to be that way, but that is the pessimistic trend line that we're seeing.
Are you naive or what, Joel? He's worse than Saddam Hussein. He has such a history.
Well, he hasn't gassed anyone yet, and I hope he never will. But I want to let.
Do you see what
Dr.
you have
Dr.
behind the
speak a
buses
little
in
bit.
Damascus? If you can see my slide, this is a picture I took in Damascus. What you have on the buses in Damascus? Shara and Saddam Hussein together.
Okay. Well, on that note, I would like to close because I don't have much time here. Dr. Dan.
Thank you so much, Joel, for moderating the event. And I also want to express my thanks to the speakers, to Fabrice, to Jonathan, to Mutulu. They have gave very interesting insight and very useful. And of course, Ofra, she is very inspiring figure for all of us. But so that's why I would like to thank everyone. Before I just express a few words, let's say to summarize, actually, I think what happens in Rojava and what is unfolding is kind of another extra tragedy in the history of the Kurds. It's not the first time, it's not the last time. And but certainly there are reasons. We probably you mentioned many let's say mistake. Negligence from the leadership, but also it's important to emphasize that this is the fate of the Kurds. Like also as Ibn Khaldun also said that the territory, they live in very landlocked territory, that even we see like in Kobane, in Hasake, and they are totally separated from each other, and it's kind of a tragedy. But also the second very, let's say, major actually the challenge that they face is like they are surrounded by 4 hostile regimes. Each of them, even though they have many conflict, many issues, the interests of conflicts, but still when it comes to the Kurds, they are united, they naturally kind of united. All these aspects are kind of serious challenges, and I don't know whether there's any solution that at some point could be provided, but was also relevant that the leadership, I mean, someone asked the question here, but also on social media, I observed that many accuse Israel of Paris meeting and betraying the Kurds, and I think it's just bullshit. So this is exactly the Turks and Jolani created this perception that the Kurds should actually, it's also kind of a strategy to actually create the kind of suspicion that the Kurds should not approach Israel. And but we also have to emphasize, also the foreign minister, Mr. Saar, said as well that Israel was maybe silent but never inactive actually, and also what happened in Washington. And yesterday there was also with the meeting when Yehuda met him, mentioned that Israel has been doing great work for the Kurds, and this is, but they have to, the Kurds, while Turkey and Jihad is actually attacking them, they just they distract from this forces and then focus on Israel. It's kind of misperception. I think it's very important that the Kurdish people should keep that in mind and know exactly who's attacking them, targeting them, and also especially in Turkey to make sure that it makes sure that the Kurds will never ever get any status or in neither federalism nor statehood in any forms. And this is exactly what Turkey is trying to do. And I think it's very important also that the Kurdish leadership, they made many mistakes. All of the speakers addressed already this, but it's very important that the Kurds learn from the history actually and listen to each other. And then what happened, despite the fact that a lot of mistakes happened, very tragic events happened, we have seen many images in very brutal way, but still what also gives me like more optimism that the Kurds are kind of mobilized and united naturally. Actually the pains, the tragedies united them, but I think that they should be more rational and not just focusing on these emotions, that they are just only united when they have pain, but they also have in rational way to take, especially the leadership, to take the responsibility, be self-critical, to recognize the mistake, to interrogate them, and then, you know, to come up with a very crystal clear vision. The Rojava never ever had a clear vision. Actually, they had people who a concept which is very abstract, which doesn't have any legitimacy, any conditions in the Middle East, in Syria, in this hostile environment. And I think it's very important to come up with a very crucial vision, and the vision of people, the Kurdish people. What do they want? I mean, this is a very important, and that should be the message for the Kurdish leadership. But sometimes, you know, the Kurdish leadership is very elitist and abstract. They don't reflect on what the Kurds want. But having said this, I once again thank you everyone, and the speaker that they took the time, and so I'm very, and also Tal, she has been helping a lot with actually, you know, administrative issues, and I would like to, maybe she's not here, but I also thank her. She does great work. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you. Also, can you tell us where this is, the recording will be found?
I mean, it will be published on the webpage of Moshe Dayan, and as soon as it's ready, we're going to circulate on the social.
Okay, so Dayan.org if you want to see the recording.
Exactly. It will be also posted on Facebook and Twitter as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry, we've run out of time. I think we could continue for another 2 hours on this very, very important subject. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.